Hello, everybody. As ever, let me know if you can hear me and see me. I see Pendrake is talking about there was no sound with the ad, wonders what was broken, because we all know how Twitch is. So, and my brain just miscellaneously fled. Okay, Quindy is saying hello, and so is Valander, so I'm going to assume that that means that you can hear me. I have a paint-packed episode today. So, last week, if you weren't here, or if you were here, you already know what I'm going to say, but we talked about things you could bring, should bring, don't need to bring, if you're packing for a convention, if you want to go paint or do sculpting at a friend's house, if you want to bring some hobby stuff with you on vacation, you need a smaller set. You probably can't bring everything that's on your desk and in your drawers that you normally rely on having when you're doing your hobby. So you got to narrow that down. The one thing we didn't talk about last week, oh, and also that is now up on my website with photos and links to stuff if you want to buy like some of the brush holders and other things that I showed. I have some links to those, to some of the kinds of things that I have had experience with, and I recommended a few things that I haven't had experience with. Actually, it was interesting. I think last week I was saying there aren't really holders designed for our short-handled brushes. And I guess I just haven't looked in a while, because when I went and looked on Amazon, I found a number of options. So that's kind of nice that there are increased options that are a little more tailored to our specific needs. Pendrake says, people make fun of me for doing internetiness with my tiny screen. I've seen a thing where it's like, I don't know, glasses to put your tiny screen in so it feels like you're watching a big screen. I am an old person and I use the biggest screens I can. I don't get the giant phone because I have tiny little girl hands, but I get the pretty good size phone. So if you want to know about general stuff, brushing, brushes, sculpting, what do you need to bring to convention classes, all that kind of stuff is in last week's episode, which you can still watch here on Twitch or is already up on the YouTube channel, Weeper's YouTube channel. And you can go to my blog, and I summarize all of it there. And some of the information, as I was saying, is updated from what I talked to you about last week, because when I was finishing up the article, I learned about new options. But the one thing I didn't talk about, and also one of the number one questions I see in forums and Facebook groups, and probably on Discord if I ever remember to go there, and that I have spent at least 10 years avoiding the question of, is what paints? What 12 to 20 30, whatever number of paints can you make a compact set that you can get a lot of color variety and travel with, or have if you have, you can't have your desk set up all the time, so you need to keep your painting set up pretty compact. And I have long avoided this question. As you guys know, I have like 800, 900 bottles of paint. It isn't how I normally paint, but at the same time, I've been studying traditional art for like 6 years, and that is how you paint in traditional art. So I haven't done it a lot, but I've done it. I've studied paint a lot more than since when I first started avoiding this question. So I've decided that I will finally go on the record and talk about this. And talk about some of how the mixing, like I'm not going to tell you how to mix every color, but just give you some tips for how you use those colors. Once you have that small set, the next hurdle is you have to use that. And if you're used to having 100, 200, whatever number of paints, it is a mind shift. And that's also going to relate to the paints that you've now seen and heard about on my show and Reaper Live and elsewhere, which are these superwashes. So that you can see that these colors are very, saturated primary type colors. So knowing how to mix some of these things and will be useful. So I'll at some point break and look at some of those and some of the figures I've painted. I might do some paint out tests. I'm not going to paint a figure with those today. We're going to talk about the mixing and color choices and stuff like that, but I will probably paint on a figure with them next week. I might try a little if there's time today. So you can see here we've got the color wheels. My goal today is to give you the miniature painter's version of what you need to know. You already have miniature paints, I'm guessing. If there's someone who's fairly new to the hobby who's watching this because they're trying to figure out what colors to buy, hello, and I hope this will help you. But I am guessing almost everyone watching this has some paints, and maybe you don't want to buy more paints, you just want to figure out how to have a subset. So I'm going into this with a few guidelines. I'm going to try to minimize random conversation about pigments and paint chemistry and stuff like that. If I start wandering off too much, someone feel free to zap me in the chat and I'll try to get back on focus. I'm also going to assume that you are primarily choosing from paints you already have. So this is Reaper's channel. I'm going to focus on Reaper paints, but the information that I'm giving you can be applied to other paint brands. I think the general guidelines are going to be enough to help you out. If some of your paints are other brands, you should still be able to find colors that work for you. And was there anything else? Oh, I guess, so I came up with my funny little tagline. Today we're going to learn why we call it color theory instead of like color facts or color system or whatever other thing you could call it. So why is it theory? I actually have two color wheels here, and this somewhat answers the question. This one assumes that your primary colors are yellow, magenta, and cyan. And the traditional one assumes that your primary colors are yellow, red, and blue. Why are there two? Why can't people agree? Because we don't live in theory is kind of the funny answer for that. But we live in the real world, and pigments in the real world do not do what these pieces of paper say they should do necessarily. So what I'm going to propose is kind of a compromise system that accommodates both of those things. So briefly, let's talk about what a primary color is. A primary color is a color you can't mix. So you can't mix yellow. You can mix versions of yellow if you start with something yellowish, but you can't mix blue and red and get yellow. You can't mix black and white and get yellow. You need yellow to make yellow. This is also true of magenta, which is where people who advocate for this system are probably going to be all like, well, you can't make magenta with the red, blue, yellow, and you can't make cyan with the red, blue, yellow, which you can sort of, but and they're not wrong. You can make red with magenta. If you mix magenta and yellow, you get red, and we'll try it out, and you really do. There is nothing I can mix of these colors that is going to turn into magenta. So let's just have magenta and red. Like, we can solve this problem without having to commit ideologically to one system or the other. What these are, what I think it's more useful to think of these is tips for choosing colors to use on your figure. We've talked about that before with these color wheels, and what might happen if you mix things together. We've talked about this before. You know, tint is the color plus white, tone is the color plus gray, and this one says, or the shade colors complement, and then shade is the color plus black. And then if you take any two given points on your color wheel, if you mix colors that are kind of like this together, you are going to get colors that are kind of like this. This is the primary thing to use the colors for, or the color wheels for. So Valander is saying paint mixing, it's magenta, yellow, and cyan. Printing is magenta, yellow, and cyan. Printing works with transparent materials, dyes, and inks. That works great in printing. You don't even need white because you're printing on a white surface. It doesn't work as well with paints you desire to be opaque. One of the reasons is there isn't a cyan pigment. So there is no pigment that exactly matches this color. Single pigment. Yes, you can mix things that look like this. If you're mixing things, if you're using a color that's mixed together, that's not a primary anymore. That's a color you obtain by mixing. So the emphasis on primaries is because these are the purest, the highest chroma, highest saturation. Saturation and chroma are kind of the same thing. That's this intensity. So this is the highest chroma version of this yellow. If you add the white and the complement and the black and whatever, you see that it starts getting less vivid. So if you're mixing, you are going to have the largest option of colors that you can mix by picking the most vivid, the highest chroma version of each of the colors. Is it important to have single pigment and every single color is the most vivid? you're painting miniatures. if you're okay with the idea that you might not be able to mix every single color in the world, which you can't with miniature paint, I'll just tell you out of the gate, I don't care how many you have, and I'll show you an example of that. Like, don't sweat it too much. I painted this figure. Let's get the gray thing. With the very non-optimal version of the color selection that I'm about to talk to you about. So this one, the Crystal Brush Qualifier at CMON Expo. This one, a gold at the ReaperCon that I took it to. This is not a terrible figure. I was mixing, it was all Reaper paints, and it was non-optimal versions of what I'm going to show you today. So did I have fewer options than I would have if I had picked, you know, the most ideal colors? Yes. Did that matter in practical application? No. So let's use magenta as an example of some of the qualities we're going to be looking for in the paints and some of the decisions you have to make, because you end up having to make decisions. So this is Quinacridone Magenta, which is one of the most commonly accepted. Use this for magenta mixing colors or for cool reds. If you hear things talk about cool red, they mean magenta-ish colors, reds that, you know, somewhere in between here. So, you know, somewhere around here are the colors that people talk about for cool reds. And in artist paint, if you see this in a number here, this means pigment red 122. So let's briefly talk about what is paint, because I just said to Valander, it makes the difference that it's paint, not ink. Paint is pigment, which is in insoluble particles. So they never dissolve. They are in suspension. They're particulate matter. That is literally the definition of pigment. So liquid pigments is not a thing. There may be concentrated versions of pigments, like if you go to the hardware store and you pick out your green or whatever for your wall, and you can watch the little streams of paint. I think there's some guy on TikTok who does guessing to the, you know, he watches the streams coming out of the hardware thing and tries to guess what the end color will be. And it's interesting because you'll see colors going in there that you would not think are part of the end result. Dyes are so there are two types of colorants, at least. I mean, maybe there's more, I don't know. But pigments are the little particles. They genuinely are little particles. They are microscopic. None of the particles are large enough for the human eye to see. If you're seeing little chunks in your paint, that is paint chunks. That is not you seeing individual pieces of pigment. Dyes are soluble materials that dissolve and penetrate into cloth and paper. So they work really well for dyeing clothes. They work really well for printing paper. They do not make great paints. One of the reasons is they're highly transparent, even more transparent than this, because golden is very nice. They have this black bars, and they paint. This is a real sample of the color. I didn't have to do that. Golden did it for me. There's an example of the zinc white, which this is a transparent white, so that's why it looks like that. I should have a tube white here, but it appears that I do not. But let's look at this one. The ultramarine. This is the funny one, because this looks way less transparent to my eye than it does here. So let's see how Puro Red looks. So there's, you know, you can see that this one is less transparent than this one. And that's one, and you're seeing the true hue. So I'm throwing some color terms at you. I have a page on my website that is, I don't know, color compendium, color collection. I'm making this hard on Quindy. Color something or other. It's on the front page linked. I think it's in bold even. Where I talk about all these color terms, and so if you're later you're like, what high chroma, what am I supposed to be doing? You can go look there. But chroma is your saturation. Like, this is a very vivid magenta pink kind of color. And that red, actually, if we get the Puro Red back, that is a very vivid red. That's like fire truck red or something. So you want those kind of color. Now, it's the version of itself. It's the highest chroma version of itself. So if we have this yellow, that's like a primary yellow, but we also have this yellow that is oxide yellow. This is still the highest saturation version of itself. This is yellow ochre in traditional paint, and that's what it's supposed to look like. So there's multiple kinds of pigments, which is what I'm talking about when we don't live in theory. Even with all of our chemistry and modern processes, we haven't been able to make the paints do what these papers say the paint should do. Anatomy of Color, thank you, Quindy. She rises to the challenge every time. So Quinacridone Magenta is PR 122, pigment red. So there's like a classification system or a certificate, like pigments are registered, and if a company chooses to put these pigment numbers on here, they have to be correct, I guess. They don't necessarily have to put all of them on. I don't think there's any rules about putting all of them on, but this is the guide that ours will use, because you could go call some other color Quinacridone Magenta if you wanted, even if it didn't have any PR 122 in it. It'd be weird of you to do that as a paint company, but they do. You will see ultramarine blue, Reaper an ultramarine blue. It does not have any of the pigment traditionally associated with the color name ultramarine blue. This is Reaper's Clear Magenta, which you can see is a pretty similar color. Like, I would be willing to bet that this is pigment red 122 or something very close to it. This is Chimera's Quinacridone Magenta, and they have had more success than I understand in making transparent colors less transparent, but there are some issues. I haven't had enough chance to paint with them because I'm always painting Reaper stuff and painting for you guys. But you see how there's some crackling there where it's applied thickly? That concerns me a little. It also skins over a little on the palette. I think it's good paint. I think you need to know what you're getting into if you use it. Like, if you just slop paint around, that may not be the paint for you. But again, you can see very similar. And here is Liquitex Quinacridone Magenta. So this is Liquitex Acrylic Gouache. That's why it says lag. I have rebottled these. And it's PR 122. I did write down the pigment number. So this is going to demonstrate a few different things. First of all, this is very uniform. Pigments aren't always. I did not bring an example of that, but some pigments are very uniform. Phthalo Blue in any given company is going to look pretty much the same. Quinacridone Magenta is going to look pretty much the same. Some of your earth colors, I think PR 101 or PB 101, there are colors that you can... I don't have a Pro Aqua. This is golden. And it's just... this is unthinned. So these were partly comparing the undertone, and these may not look the same. This probably has white in it. They're trying to make an acrylic gouache. This is the Chimera. And they're trying to make, essentially, an acrylic gouache. So both of these companies are trying to take a pigment that is inherently transparent and make it not transparent. So there may be other things in here. There may be some black in there. I don't think there is. I mean, their marketing is that these are single pigments, but there are things called opacifiers that do change some of the properties. These may be looking more different on screen than they look to the eye, because that is how screens are sometimes. But if you're seeing these subtle differences here, there are colors that are like, okay, they got a yellow from this, they got an orange from this, they got a brown from this, they got a red from this. So knowing the pigment number doesn't automatically mean that you're getting the same exact color every time. It just means it's more similar and you know some of the properties of that pigment. In miniature painting, we're used to having very uniform paints, and we whine about, oh, my yellow's too transparent, my red's too transparent, this one's kind of shiny, this one doesn't, whatever. We have majorly uniform paints because someone has worked really hard at that. Pigments are idiosyncratic little nut jobs, and they're all different. One might be shiny, one is transparent, one is opaque, one dries quicker than the other. We don't notice that much in acrylic painting, but it's one of the things oil painters consider when they're choosing their palettes. It's like, well, do I need this color to dry fast? Do I need this color to dry slow? I meant to say this before. Pendrick had said it'd be fun if Anne and I each picked an essential 30 paints from Reaper's line, do this double blind, and then see how much overlap there is between your lists. So I am essentially doing that. I think I'm picking fewer than 30. I'm leaving you some room to pick your own colors. So if you want to ask Anne to do the same thing, then you'll have done your double blind, because I don't think that she regularly goes and watches my show. I unfortunately don't have time to regularly watch hers. So that is one of the things that, because you'll hear people go on about single pigment and artist colors and like they're magical, and it's useful, But there are variations between them. There are things companies have done to try to achieve certain properties. So we like matte paints. So I'm sure Chimera added matting agents. This is trying to be like wash, which is a matte paint. So I'm sure that Liquitex added matting agents. We know that Reaper adds matting agents. Golden is the company that's kind of like, you deal with it. Like, this is the pigment, unless they say otherwise, which they're so flat, is their version of we're making matte, self-leveling acrylics. We're making acrylics that have the properties of gouache that people like. Basically, Liquitex and Golden both said, we're going to make miniature paint. Many years after other people made miniature paint. But you can see, I think, a little that this is shiny on the bottle, because they haven't added any opacifiers. Because it's the strip that's the shiniest. So the bottle's a little bit shiny, but that strip is shiny. Where, you know, this is like eggshell maybe. In the mass tone, once it's thinned out, it's matte. This one is all matte, and the Reaper is all matte. So the trade-off is, if you have these super pure colors, a lot of them are going to be transparent. Not all artist pigments are transparent. A lot of the ones that are not are expensive, so they're not going to be in miniature paint. And I'm trying to talk about pigments that you're going to encounter in miniature paint. So I talked about like chroma, the brightness. But the brightness is in context to its value. So value is, we have it set up like this. Value is how light or dark it is. So it's real easy to see in black and white. And I had a little black and white thing here. But you guys know this. It's real easy to see value in black and white. It is less easy to see it in colors. But colors, the most intense version of a color has an inherent value. So I'm going to do the black and white trick. So just remember, this is yellow, this is blue, this is red. And it's the same here in the mini one. So you can kind of take a guess. Let's no, that didn't help. You can kind of take a guess at what these colors are going to turn into. You know, how dark they're going to be. Which, if you think, you see these grays here. There's a grayscale that's built into my color wheel. This is why we use the color wheel. So they have value 1 as the darkest. Some will do it flipped, where value 10 or value 5 is the darkest and value 1 is the lightest. So they've got a 10-point scale. If you want, just think about it as a 5-point scale in your mind. You know, what value would you say yellow is from 1 to 5? And what value would you say blue is, red, and let's throw in purple. So think about that for a minute while I flip through the many, that was not the right thing. The many options that we have to go through in our psychedelic slideshow before I get to the value, the black and white. So you can see that yellow, as you probably predicted, is a very high value color. I think we do say high value. It's very light. Blue is kind of in the middle. Red is probably a little darker than you thought it was, and the violet is very dark. So that darkness and lightness doesn't necessarily map to the intensity of the color question. So we'll look at a few examples of that. This is Chimera's paint set has a phthalo green blue shade and a phthalo green red shade. I'm going to talk about split primaries a little, but it's kind of like this one is a little more green and this one is a little more red. It's like one of the ways people solve the we don't live in theory problem is by doing what's called a split complementary palette. And you can look that up if you're interested. I'm not going to dive too deep into that. But the idea is that each of these primaries, so blue, yellow, red, really has 2 of them. So and I kind of talked about that with the magenta, so we'll get that back as the example. So you don't really have this magic perfect red that mixes everything. You have a warm red, and you have a cool red. And the same thing for the other colors. So we have a warm yellow and a cool yellow and a warm blue and a cool blue. Yellow, you can kind of get away with just, there is one that is kind of like the primary yellow that they use in there's more than one. So this one is supposed to be like the cool version, and this one is supposed to be like the warm version. I'm going to be honest with you, I do not see a massive amount of difference, if any. Like, to me, phthalo blue is phthalo blue, and style its hair a little differently if you want. It's still Phthalo Blue. But you can see how dark it is and it's even darker. Like I can see more of the line when I'm looking at the screen than I can see when I'm looking at it in person, because I've got like bright lights streaming down on there. I don't know, difference between cameras and eyes, who knows. But when you thin it out, and so that's a good tip. That's why I always do the thinning when I'm doing my swatches. You can see the intensity of the color. Dioxazine purple or violet PV23 is another one that does that. Like if you see the mass tone, you see it just straight out of the bottle, it will often look close to black. But when you start thinning it down, you can see how intense that color is. And where is my Reaper Purple? So clear purple, it isn't quite as, like you can see the purpleness a little more in the mass tone, but you see that same thing where you kind of see more of it once you thin it down. So don't confuse the intensity of the color with how light or dark it is. Yellow is supposed to be light, and violet is supposed to be dark. Valander asks, what exactly is the difference between clear phthalo blue and clear phthalo green? Is it a different pigment with the same origin, or is it the same pigment with a different medium? So an important thing to note is I do not actually know what pigments Reaper uses. Their process is proprietary, and as much as I've hung around there, I do not know all the secrets. My guess is that yes, they are two different pigments. So this is, in fact, I'm guessing that Reaper may use two greens, but I don't know. So there's this clear green versus clear phthalo green. I'm going to try to only talk about paints that are in production that you could go order off the website today. But I did make a few exceptions for some of these, special edition phthalos, the 9.6 that came out, because I know a lot of you have them, and it helps us look at some other options of things that are in print. So phthalo blue, you can use phthalo blue to mix greens, but phthalo green is a pigment on its own. Whether the Reaper paint is actually phthalo green, my guess is yes, but I cannot confirm. Or it's a mixture of phthalo blue and whatever yellow they use. Maybe they use more than one yellow. I don't know for sure, but the fact that Anne put the name clear on it suggests to me that it probably is the Reaper version of a single pigment paint and is going to be your most intense option. I didn't really say why does it matter? Why does it matter if you have a single pigment paint? Every time you mix two pigments together, the mix gets a little duller. So if I mix this red and this yellow to get this orange, but there's an existing orange pigment, that orange pigment might be higher chroma than my mixture of these two. And then if I take that orange and I mix it with, I probably shouldn't have used colors that I don't do a lot. I mix it with this red violet, or I mix it with the magenta to get back to red. It's not going to be as vivid a red as the red that I could have started with. Is it a deal breaker if your colors are pretty bright? Probably not. I'll do some tests. We'll find out together. But for the purposes of painting, like how many things are you painting neon magenta? Probably not that many. Maybe a few princess dresses or fairy queens or something like that here and there. But most of the time, what we're going to be wanting to do is mix colors we don't have, and those are often going to be duller. Like we're going to want rust brown to put rust on the swords, and we're going to want, dull blue because this guy's undead or whatever. So don't get hung up too much on the pigment thing. Let's start with the easy ones. Oh, I was talking about how cyan doesn't really exist. So this color wheel, if you choose to get one, Art's Cool. It is the Color Wheel Company. I thought, is this the Color Wheel Company too? Yes, okay. I didn't know the same people did both of these. Learned something new today. If you choose to get one of these, it comes with a practice book and also a recommended pigment list where they are, they go through a number of different acrylic brands and what you can use. And almost all of these, they use Phthalo Blue, which in Reaper is going to be clear blue, as the cyan. And if you mix phthalo blue with white, you get cyan. But I just said, once you start mixing things together, they're not primary colors. They're not as pure. So I don't think it's... I would just use phthalo or clear blue rather than buying a mix. Because you can buy things that are mixed together. I think this is... Yeah, this is the Liquitex... Okay, they didn't do it. One thing I have somewhere is, they call it cyan or primary blue or whatever, but it's phthalo plus white. So why wouldn't I just use phthalo and put my own amount of white in? One guy I was listening to uses this color, or a pigment with this color, PG50, pigment green 50, most commonly known as cobalt teal, as his cyan. So he kind of does actually what I'm telling you here, which is, you know, get yourself a good fire truck red, a magenta, a blue, and a cyan, and a purple, and a couple other colors. Instead of worrying about, you know, matching this color wheel or that color wheel or whatever other system exactly. You will not find this in a miniature paint. You might find a color that looks kind of this, but you are not going to find PG50 in a miniature paint. This right here is how I know this, Series 7. So when you buy artist paints, they are listed by series. If you've ever been in the art store, you may have noticed this. So this is Series 1. Series 1 is the cheap stuff, which happily is actually a lot of really good pigments that you use a lot of, like white and black. The price of a series, you know, a high series, some only do up to 5, apparently Golden does up to 7. It can be double or triple the price of this for the same volume of paint, simply because the pigment is more expensive to source. It does not mean the pigment is better. Like I said, a lot of the good stuff is in Series 1. And I have some paints that have some properties that you would think are awful that I've paid a lot of money for, but I knew going in that's what I was getting. So don't conflate the series number is a better pigment. It's just a pigment that costs more to get. And I will do this interesting piece of trivia while I get set up to paint. So if you want to, in the chat, take a guess at what percentage of, you know, there are like several factories that manufacture all these pigments that get used in your house paint and these artist paints and whatever other thing. What percentage do you think our artist paints make up of the world pigment market? Like, of the pigment that is made, what percentage of that is being used to make artist paints? So I'll give you some time to think about that and put your guesses in the chat. While I'm gonna try having the the palette on screen, but I will still swatch stuff out because what paints are gonna be shiny, and depending on how it works. Oh, there's my value scale. Of course, when I don't need it anymore. So let's start with magenta because it's gonna show us some of the decisions that we have to make. So this is the clear magenta. And then if I go to the, I don't have a place to put my paper. Oh, I know everybody always likes to ask about what paper I use for this. I'm not using my normal watercolor paper because I have to cut it up and it's a pain in the butt. I'm using Strathmore Vision mixed media paper. So this is lighter weight, but mixed media means it is meant to accommodate wet media. It may curl a little, and I'm just gonna learn to live with that, even if it makes scanning or whatever fun. So here's clear magenta, and I picked out a couple of colors from the standard line, which we can already see a few clues from here, that you might, if you don't want to use a color as transparent as clear magenta, or you don't have clear magenta, let's look at some alternatives. So this is the problem that we're gonna have as miniature painters, and put clear on here for a reason so that you know going in these are pretty transparent colors. That means that when you're mixing, you are probably gonna have to mix in white and or black into your mix to make it opaque enough to cover the way you want. Whether you want to deal with that or not is a personal decision. So yeah, saying the clears on the oxides from the Reaper line are the easy answer for what, you know, primaries essentially do I get. But either you don't have those or you don't like those may make you be okay with compromising the purity of the chroma for the other properties that you like. So here is the clear magenta, as promised, very clear. I guess I could have put a stripe along the paper. We'll do it if we have to. This is violet red. So this is violet red 9026. And it is redder, but it is still a cool red. I think it would still work in terms of a lot of the stuff you're going to mix, but the colors it's going to mix are probably not going to be as pure as you'll get with this. We'll do a couple little tests. And then this next one is pale violet red, which I think is probably mostly the clear magenta color, but with white added so that it's opaque. So this is what it would look like if you did that yourself. But it's still a pretty high intensity color too. So I will grab the clear yellow and the clear blue, and we'll mix a couple of these together and see what we get. Now, the first rule of working with phthalo is like a bully. Phthalo is a very strong, we call it, it has high tinting strength. A little goes a long way. So I would never make a drop of phthalo and then add yellow to it, because I'm going to be using up a lot of yellow. And in this case, I'm adding magenta, I think. Yes, I'm adding 3 magentas. And then I will do 3 little pools. You see, I'm being very conservative, because if I need more phthalo, I can go get it, but... And even the yellow, you have a lot more yellow. So I've got a nice orange with the clear magenta. And here's the problem with mixing, because you try taking it from the side, like instead of dipping down in the middle, you try to take it from the side so you don't pollute your thing. All right, sorry. Apparently I'm getting a phone call. So you can see it's becoming more of an orangey red. And I may not actually be able to get to like red. I don't know. It's still a little pinky. And this is why, we don't live in theory. Why don't we just have a red? And we do. But I will put some of these colors out. I should have done this sideways. So this is mixed with the yellow. Do a couple options here. So that's clear magenta mixed with clear yellow. Now let's mix the violet red, the 9026, with the yellow. So you see it goes to that orange pretty quick. Is that orange very slightly duller? Probably. Now we're starting to see it a little more, though, that it's duller. It also was a stronger, it got stronger quicker. So I did get closer to a true red with that, because there is some true red in that. Let me mix that in between, kind of go with that. And that's closer to true orange. And we'll do like the yellowy orange right there. But are these terrible colors? Are these not vivid and vibrant? I mean, they're fine. Like maybe I wouldn't be able to mix this exact shade if I use this color instead of this color. But I can still mix some stuff, so I'm okay. But now let's try it with the pale violet red that I'm sure has some white in it. So I know it's going to be a little more powerful, so I will... the orange is, again, very similar. Mix a little more in. And now we're starting to see the orange is a little more washed out, because there's more white in there. So let's see, that was kind of the darker version. Kind of the middle orange. So that's not a huge difference there. More different there. Now, I'm not trying to match these exactly. I'm just giving you a quick example of the color mixing, and then I'll do the same with the phthalo blue. So Valander guessed less than 1/100th of 1%, and Kirsch said that seemed a tad low. you're in the ballpark. It is less than 1%. It's 1% or less. And for exactly the reasons that Valander said, house, interior, industrial, cars. So Toyota actually decides what pigments we can have. There was a brouhaha in the watercolor world 5 or 6 years ago because there was this wonderful color that was going to be discontinued. And lots of people, including myself, bought some backup tubes of it. And basically it was because Toyota decided to stop making a certain car color. So the volume wasn't there for the sales, so the pigment factory just stopped making it, which sucks for artists, but there you go. So now we're going to see what kind of purples we get out of these. You saw how tiny that drop was, right? Yeah, let's get a whole lot more of the magenta, and that's a very nice purple. Now let's try it with the violet red. I'm going to get a little less because that color was a bit more intense. And this is very much not a true purple. Does that matter? I'm going to recommend that you have a purple, so maybe it doesn't. And here we are with the pale violet red. No, yes, pale violet red. So that's the one that has white in it. And these are part of a triad, as you can tell by the numbering system. I believe... Oh, I should totally know what the shade is because it's one of Michael Proctor's favorite colors, but I'm blanking. All right, so here's where we're definitely starting to see some difference. So this is a true, you know, very intense purple. I'll thin it out a little. It's pretty close to, I mean, it's not identical, but it's pretty close to the dioxazine violet. But I'm going to suggest you use clear purple, which is Reaper's version of dioxazine violet, I think. So then you'll be fine. This is still a purple, but it's a desaturated purple. This is a great color. It's very useful. Sometimes you don't want to mix the most saturated versions of things. So you might mix a blue and a yellow that aren't going to make, you know, like a bright vivid green because you're trying to paint leaves or something, or orc skin that's not supposed to be a bright vivid green. So you're not always looking to mix the optimal thing, but this is a kind of test that you can use to see what your pigments do. So based on this, I would probably rather have the white of the pale violet red than the red of this, other than if I've got a violet, maybe I don't care. So I think both of these are viable replacements for clear magenta if you want something a little more opaque or you don't happen to already own clear magenta. So just to refresh you on my opacity test, I paint the full strength paint along the whatever part of the code that is, and you can see that this is pretty opaque, this is very transparent, and this is slightly less transparent. So that's kind of your consideration there. I have these so I have like 80 paints off to the side, and they're all organized in a very careful way so that I can find the ones that I mean to find when I want to. So that's my recommendation for magenta. Let's talk about yellow. I mentioned to you that in a split primary system, people would say have 2 yellows. I think you're fine with one. I think if you get, like, the middle of the road yellow seems to be the most accessible yellow. I don't know, yellow pigments do that more. I'm not sure how to explain it, but so that's clear yellow. One alternative to that I think is good, why am I putting that away, is Canary Yellow from the Bones Paints. It's even more intense. But it may not mix as intently. I'm not going to do like the mix test with all the colors. And now I have a little yellow. There was gunk on my yellow spout, and I foolishly dealt with that on top of the palette. Hopefully I'm not alone. I'm not the only person who does stupid things like that. Yeah, I didn't expect the artist paint to be like a huge segment of the market, but I did not have any idea how small it was until I was watching one of the shows that has given me, or one of the streams or whatever, that has given me all this useless knowledge about pigment that I'm now sharing with you. So this is Torchlight. Now that I'm looking at it, that says 2.9, so this may not be a currently accessible paint. So we'll just put that to the side. We'll ignore that. If you wanted a warmer yellow, there's Candlelight Yellow. So you can see what I mean by warmer yellow, like it's already kind of shading towards orange a little bit. And Golden Yellow are both good options. I think you'd be fine with just either Clear Yellow or Canary Yellow. But if you want to do the split primary thing and you have some space, you can do it. I don't have... Oh, okay. Someone's looking it up on Google. This was... I don't even remember which lecture this was. There were a lot of people in the fine art world, companies, who started doing kind of live streams and other things to keep us occupied during the quarantine. And it was something I watched in that. So this is, let's go back to doing it this way, I guess. This is Clear Yellow. And then this is Canary Yellow. I mean, yellow is yellow, and none of them are going to be opaque, but that one is probably slightly more opaque. And then if you did want to do the split complementary thing, which I don't necessarily think you have to, come down here, I guess. This is Candlelight Yellow. And this one is Golden Yellow. I will just do a quick mix since I already have the phthalo on my palette to kind of show you that what I was talking about, where you're mixing like an intense green or slightly less intense green. So let's try to get the world's smallest amount of phthalo here. So this is with the Clear Yellow. Maybe just a hair more phthalo. You can see it's a pretty vibrant green. Nope, see, now I'm going to let it take over. So I will try to mix the other two to a similar proportion, but I'm being very not scientific about this. Other three, I should say. So this is the Canary Yellow. Oh, crap. I had a big water drop fall in there. I don't know if I need to get another. So this pool is going to be a little more transparent than it should be. But I'm just going to paint on white paper, so I don't think it's going to be that noticeable. And then these are the ones that have, they're a little orangier of yellows, and they're not going to mix as vibrant a green. So this is going to be the green that maybe this is nicer for orcs and leaves and stuff like that. I don't know if I went a little dark there. Just a little bit back of that. So the value is similar, but the color starts being different. And it's duller, but sometimes you want that. So that would be a reason why you might want to have a ready-to-go warm yellow with a hint of orange. Here's an example of how living in color theory works. Which blue is warm, phthalo or ultramarine? Apparently, no one agrees. All right, so this was the green with the Clear Yellow. And it's a pretty vivid green. Although, I don't know, nothing looks vivid on my screen today. Hopefully, it's coming through on your screens better. That is the green I mixed with the Canary Yellow. And it may just look, I might not have gotten the same proportion of blue, but you get a nice bright green still with that one. If we do it with these orange yellows, though, this was the one with Candlelight Yellow. I was like so conservative with the Phthalo Blue that I didn't even mix enough paint. And then this is the Golden Yellow. But you may want to mix greens like that because many of the things in nature are not, super bright green. So it might be worth it to you. It's how tight is your slots? Like how many that came out wrong. How much space do you have? How many numbers of bottles do you want to have? So I'm trying to do sort of the minimum and then some suggestions for things you can do to expand that. So let's look at our fire truck red options. This is clear red. This is brilliant red, which is kind of my go-to if I'm painting a bright red. I almost always reach for this color because it is slightly opaque, and I like that. This is fire red, which is a little more subdued. This is fresh blood. Now we're starting to get, it's a little darker. And then heraldic red is also a little darker. So probably there are other things in all of those, but it may or may not affect mixing more than the other. But I don't even think I used one of those for the, so maybe Quindy can find it. I think it's called A Critique-Filled Promenade. If you search for Promenade, there's only a couple articles that are going to come up, and one of them is that. And I show the palette that I used to paint the figure that I showed you earlier, which is a bunch of very non-optimal colors. Well, not total. I mean, I was trying to make a split primary palette with a cool red and a warm red and a purple and cool blue and a warm blue. But I was at a paint and take, and I was just kind of picking out of the bins for what I had available. I was not, picking from my full shelf selection. I will probably do the mixing test with this too, using the phthalo, and we'll see what kind of purples we get out of traditional red and blue. Because this is kind of the purple that, oops, that did not go like I hoped. I think the purple we mixed with the magenta and the phthalo, I think is the kind of color that people think of when they think of, a really vivid purple. Which I don't think is possible to mix from this kind of, the fire truck red. So I'm just going to put some of that back because that was like a lot of paint loss. Quindy did find the blog post that I'm talking about. Valander. After some digging, the best source I can find is the Pigment Market Size Report, which divides it into paints and coatings, plastics, printing, ink, dyes, leather, and other uses. And a hobby and artist paint is glommed into the same category as house paint, spray paint, and industrial paint. Yeah, because we think of pigments as paint, but it's getting put into plastic to color the plastic and lots of other stuff too. So pigments have a wide variety of industrial uses. All right, I have to be very careful to keep these reds in the same order or I will mess up which is which when we start doing our test. I'm going to get a new piece of paper for the reds and do it across the top this time. All right, is it not very bright? Bump it up a little. I thought I fixed that beforehand. But so this is clear red. This is kind of we want to find the closest thing we can find to this in our sets. Because that's probably the purest mixing color, red, that Reaper has. So this is brilliant red, which you can see why I usually reach for that one. It's pretty red. This is fire red that I think probably has a little white or gray in it. Maybe a little magenta too, because it's a little cooler. So I would actually, if I wanted to do a true split primary and have magenta kind of as a separate color, that might be nice as a cool red. Although I think there are even cooler reds. This is a little cooler too, probably because they're darker. There may be a little blue in these already. And this is heraldic red that may not be mixed very well now that that was the one where I had the oops. So yes, that seems thinner than my swatch, so I suspect there was paint gunked up in the nozzle. And I will get another, yeah, that looks thicker. I will get another sample of that for the mixing. So actually, rather than mixing with the phthalo, I'm going to mix with yellow because orange is, I mean, purple is still going to come in as a factor, but we have the magenta for mixing purples. Orange is more likely to show up as the, oh, this is starting to get dulled down. Well, Valender, I said I wasn't going to talk about paints that aren't available, so I didn't pick that one out. But you already know what red you want, which is the original Hollyberry red. I don't know that I have the original. I might just have the newest incarnation, but Valender recommends that as a very good red to work with if you do happen to have that from previous holidays. But I'm trying to confine my exploration to things that anyone watching this could go get if they didn't already have it. Even though I want people to, hey Christine, I want people to start by looking through the paints you already have, unless you're looking for excuses to buy paint. I mean, I'm often looking for excuses to buy paint, so feel free to use me as your excuse if you want. But that was one of the kind of cornerstone ideas that I was working on. I think I need to mix a little bit more in there. Again, I am not going to be able to match the values exactly because I'm doing this quickly. Don't worry. Like, if you can try to separate the how dark or light is it versus how vivid is it from your equation when you're judging these swatches, including if you do this yourself. See, I just put too much red in that one, but I do have some backup yellow. Now I can't see because of the glare. That's why I'm leaning over to the side if anyone's watching the mini camera, the little camera. The lights are glaring on that pretty good for me, and that's why we're going to swatch them on paper. So far, these are all actually pretty similar. So I'm impressed. All right, now make sure that I do it in the same order I did the initial ones, and again, I mixed too little. Like way too little because I was being conservative. All right, let's put a little more yellow in each of these. And yes, I'm having some cross-contamination, but you guys don't want to stay here all day watching me mix paint, so we're going to live with that. This is the Brilliant Red. That is what I would probably put in my set instead of Clear Red, because I am lazy and don't want to mix as much. A lot of the mixing I've done has been for watercolor, where transparency is actually considered a feature, not a bug for a lot of people. Or oil paints where you just work around it various ways. Yeah, that needs more yellow. I'm running out of that yellow though. But I think it is, because this one is darker, I think it is starting to dull out the orange a little. So I probably would not pick Heraldic Red unless, you know, that's the one I had and I didn't want to buy anything else. Even Fresh Blood is a little bit on the edge, although, I mean, it's not bad. It's better than I expected, actually. But either Brilliant Red or Fire Red would make a good alternative to Clear Red. But let's check the opacity of them. The Fire Red's not bad, actually. And then that's the Clear Red. So those are some red options. We did magenta already. Now we go into the wonderful world of blue. I hope that I have plenty of palette papers, because apparently I'm going to need some. All right, blue, which you may have heard me rant about before. I don't know. So clear blue and or clear phthalo blue. Like when I was showing you the red shift and green shift phthalos, the difference is slight enough in my eye that I would far rather have another blue that's very different, which I will talk about in a minute. So to me, this is pretty much the same difference thing, but you may have other feelings, because that's that people get people get personal feelings about colors and pigments. So either one of those would be like the purest mixing blue that you could have for your set. But some alternatives. Since this was a special edition color, I'm actually going to put it back and just compare it to the clear blue. So this is Cyan Blue, 9117. And then this is Brilliant Blue. The undertone is kind of similar. Once again, I have selected paints that are part of a triad, I believe. And lastly, I picked Reaper's version of Ultramarine, but partly to discuss Ultramarine. But we'll give that a stab. Hey, Christine, Rhonda the Magnificent. I don't know about that. You picked a bad episode because I'm sure that you know way more about pigments and paints than I ever will. Oh, Kirsten, the internal search for hawk turquoise. I feel your pain. I still say you need to find someone like Christine who's an artist and familiar with mixing and see if they can mix you. So like bring it, if you're coming to ReaperCon, bring it and ask, well, Anne's not coming this year. But it's worth seeing if someone else can figure out how to mix that color. But because I don't, you know, it's GW. I'm pretty sure that they protected their proprietary information and no one knows the pigments that they used in that. Yeah, my blue things are getting all messed up here, but that's Cyan Blue. I did shake these before I started, but I didn't check the nozzles because, like I said, 80 paints are sitting off to the side for this purpose. I did forget to discuss the easy colors. And we'll throw that ultramarine in. Ultramarine. Which also may not be mixed sufficiently. Oh, okay, it's not too bad. All right, this is the clear blue. And I'm gonna do the thinning it out a little because we're getting into colors that the inherent value is darker, so it may be harder to see. This is cyan. This is brilliant blue, which, I mean, you can see it's very intense. That may even be more like the clear phthalo blue. And then this is ultramarine, which, you know, we're talking about warm versus cool. Although, as I said, apparently there's disagreement about, we'll see. Christine, which do you think is warm, phthalo or ultramarine? Talking about the true pigments. But in this case, you can see that there's a difference between these two. Which one you want to decide is warm or cool? Apparently, people do not agree. Maybe you could send, ask somebody if you could pay them $20 you send out a painted sample of your hawk turquoise and see if they can come up with a mix that's as close as possible from, you know, Reaper paints or available pigments or whatever. So I think of ultramarine as warmer and phthalo as cooler, but apparently, like, the art world is divided on this. Okay. But let's mix a little. Let's mix with the green with the true red. Be interesting to mix with the true red. Make sure I have the right one. So we're probably not going to get a pretty purple out of some of these. But like I said, you don't always want a pretty purple. And there's my man Phthalo being way too overpowering. Phthalo's like that person who's like overconfident. They're not overconfident, but, you know, because I'm like a lame introvert and stuff. not very confident. I don't deal well with people who are very self-confident. If they freak me out. Yeah, I'm exaggerating all of this, of course. But to me, Phthalo is like that. Phthalo is like that person who's very confident and knows exactly what they want and comes in and takes charge. And I don't always want that in a paint color. So that's why I'm like an ultramarine person. And you can see we're getting way more different mixes than we did with the other ones we've tried so far. But let's try with that brilliant blue that I thought was a little more phthalo-y. And put enough right on that one. So these aren't that pretty purple that I got over here when I was mixing the magenta and phthalo blue. But it is still possibly a useful color. This mixing thing is just meant as a way for if you have paints and you want to test which one would be the best for your mini set. This is not like a moral commentary on these colors and their ability to make purple. And Christine agrees that this is a good way to test your vividness by... Yeah, I didn't do my sheet the way I meant to. Yes, I did. All right, I just put things closer together. All right, so this is the purple with... So this is clear red with clear blue. And this is made a very dark... Actually, this is like an awesome color that I would like to use in shading. So this is kind of similar. I often use, what the heck is it called? One of the super dark purples, and I've talked about it before, but I'm now blanking because I want to remember it. I often use for mixing shadow colors. And that would be, you know, I wouldn't have to bring that with me because now I know how to mix it. So maybe I didn't get enough red in that. Yeah, the undertone's still pretty similar. Then, so that was the cyan blue. This is the brilliant blue that my theory is this actually has fewer other things. Like I think that cyan blue must have white in it for sure. I mean, all these other, that's how Anne is making them opaque for you. Is having other things. So this is the Faux Ultramarine. Because, so this is why Curse has this frustration, that he has this hot turquoise. Even though I'm showing you, these are colors that you could get as many possible other colors. You can't get all the colors, because like I said, you don't have, you know, my Series 7, I paid $30 or whatever for this cobalt teal. That you're not going to find that in a miniature paint line. So that's not your secret, Curse, because you're asking about something that was from a miniature paint line. But that, you know, there are colors that you can't get. This is one of them. That is not, so far as I know, other than Chimera. I don't have it yet. Chimera has now made a true PB29 ultramarine paint. And to me, there's just a world of difference between this blue and that blue. And I went through all of the Reaper Blue paints one day and swatched them out and did the thinning it down, and I didn't find anything that came close, because that's why ultramarine blue is a primary color. Are you, Moonlight Minis, are you asking about the Chimera paints? The Chimera paints say that they are single pigment, and they are also super opaque, which is, I don't know how they do that. I'll show you the magenta. This is their magenta. And they say PR 122, and it's kind of the same hue as there's the Reaper one. Here's a Liquitex one. So it's, I believe them that it's PR 122. I just have no idea how they got it that opaque. So I don't know if there are other pigments in there or what they're using magic for opacifiers. I do have some issues with that paint, but they do use single pigments. Liquitex Acrylic Gouache, they're not all single pigments. No, if it was from the bug, it wouldn't be PR 122. It would be, I don't know, PR 83 or whatever. But Liquitex Acrylic Gouache, you can look through, and they have a number of single pigment paints. You do have to look. They're not all single pigment. And then this other one I was showing is Golden's version. So that first one was Liquitex's version of miniature paint because it's matte, fluid, and self-leveling. And this is Golden's version that is matte, fluid, and self-leveling. But they also have some mixes. And so what they don't have is they don't have a magenta. They don't even have a cool red. They have cadmium red that they mix white in. I didn't get it. So they have this and they mix some red in it, or it's the Purell and they mix some red in it. I can't remember. But they don't have like a magenta, which is, I'm assuming there's a reason because it's Golden. And they do things for a reason. I keep debating whether I care enough about this to actually call their helpline or their artist info line or whatever they call it. Because it's Golden. There has to be a reason why they decided they couldn't make a flat, matte, self-leveling magenta. And I would like to know what it is in the light of what the other people have done. But in the real world, I will just use the other company's magenta and not worry about it. So this is the true ultramarine blue, which interestingly is, I told you guys I wouldn't nerd out too much about pigments, but I'm going to nerd out. This is the synthetic version of an even more expensive pigment. So originally this blue was lapis lazuli. Like they took that rock and ground it up and got the blue out of it and turned it into paint. It was at one time worth more than its weight in gold. The reason the Madonna figure in a lot of medieval and Renaissance art has blue robes is because this was the high life. This was valuable and precious and showing how much you as a patron of the arts could afford to spend on making these pictures. So it would be negotiated in the contract with the artist how much blue was going to be included in the painting. There was a contest, like now there's a contest to see who can get us, the SpaceX thing, who can get us to space. There was a similar contest, who can make us a blue pigment that doesn't cost an arm and a leg. And they came up with this version of ultramarine blue. So now we can have it, but it's not cheap enough that miniature companies are going to use it. So now I'm going to mix the red with that, and we'll see an example of how you probably can't make the same colors. I know there are other colors. The thing I like to do, one of the reasons I like it, is I like to mix burnt sienna with it and get a really nice gray. But I just like it in general. It's easier to work with than, so it's a totally different purple. I'll put a little more red in. That's kind of similar to that, but I just like my ultramarine. But now there are options, so my search is content. So I would, because I am me, put this in my little, I only have 22 or 30 or whatever paints. I'm trying to keep the number down. We'll see. What are we up to? We've got, I don't know, I think we're only up to 7. So we got lots of space left, right? We got magenta, yellow, warm yellow if you want to have warm yellow, blue, and warm red. Oh, I'm going to put these blues away. So those are kind of like the primaries, but I would also recommend having some of the secondaries pre-mixed because earlier Valander asked what's the difference between phthalo blue and phthalo green. Well, they really are different pigments. So yes, you can mix green with phthalo blue and yellow, but there are paints that start, single pigment paints where the pigment starts out green and you get some different options with that. Plus, do you want to have to mix stuff like all the things all the time? So you get a little more color variety and then you also save a step or two. So there are people who tell you that all you need to paint are red, blue, and yellow, or magenta, cyan, and yellow. And then as acrylic painters, we would also need white. Watercolor people just use the paper, like how I thin things out. And then a lot of people are like, don't even ever use black. But a lot of us are going to have black. So actually, white and black are absolutely going to be part of your core set. And for the Reaper line, the pure black and the pure white are your best. There's a lot of pigment in here. These are going to mix cleanly colors. Now, all of the whites in the Reaper line. I mean the true whites, not the, this is linen white, there's something else in here. This is Vampire Pallor, there's something else in here. I mean the ones that say, you know, white, white. So solid white, pure white, dragon white. They're all going to be titanium whites. I would be very surprised if any miniature company had a non-titanium white. You can buy them. So this is zinc white. And then I forgot I had it, so this is also zinc white. And they call this a mixing white. So it's less intense, like things dull down real fast with titanium white, or, you know, pastel out. So I will try to get an equal size drop of that. And then why don't I shake this? Phthalo green plus magenta is another great way to mix neutrals that I like. So this is a thicker color, so I'm going to take just a little bit and then mix some water in. I mean, like, it's a thicker consistency, but I think now that nope, I think I should have stuck with it out of the bottle. Even though we're going to assume that it's about the same opacity or same pigment ratio to binder, I don't know. All right, let's see. Let's do it with the phthalo blue, the clear blue, because that makes a nice dramatic difference. But I have to try to get the same amount in each of those. Yeah, maybe I should just drop it. I'll just drop in directly. But I'll make them small drops. And now we mix, and this will probably be a lot more pasteled than the second one. But you can see why people say just use phthalo as a cyan equivalent, essentially. So that's tinting strength, and I talked about that with the phthalo versus the ultramarine. It's not that this is cheap and they didn't put enough pigment in there and whatever. It's PW4 is a different pigment than PW6. That is the point of having two whites, and that is why you would do it. As a miniature painter, like, you don't have to worry about it, I don't think. But if you have trouble, because you're going to be mixing a lot of white when you're mixing your colors. So if you're having trouble with that, you know, this bottle isn't huge. You could rebottle it. And bring that with you. So Moonlight Minis is asking whether I can recommend a good resource for learning more about pigments. I've always focused my knowledge on color, but this is a hole in my knowledge. Art is Creation and Handprint. Both of those, I mean, Handprint in particular is coming at it from a watercolor point of view. They are talking about watercolors and naming specific brands, but pigments are pigments. Like I said, Toyota is why we don't have some colors. So it's the same pigments in watercolor and acrylic and oil paints. So the general information of this is a transparent staining pigment that has good light fastness, all of those words are going to apply regardless of the paint. If it talks about granulation, that is something that is only pertinent to watercolor paint. But those were the two best things I found. Jackson Art has the I'd rather read it in English version instead of the fancy charts with various, you know, headers and stuff version, because those are dense documents. Both the Art is Creation and the Handprint site, though they are dense. They will throw a lot of information at you. There are dozens of some of these pigments. Like, there are dozens of reds. And some of these sites are talking about pigments that aren't in common usage anymore. So unless you're someone like Christine, you probably don't want to go searching these sites. Or you're just curious and you want to know more about paint. But you can kind of, like, everyone's going to say, well, you should use this pigment as your red, and you should use this pigment as your blue. Clearly, it's an opinion thing as well. We don't live in theory. We don't live where the color theory works exactly like it's supposed to. Nobody has the right answer. Some of it is finding the right answer for you. So just pick someone to believe and go with them until you get to the point where you're not happy with what they did, and then look for more things, I guess would be my advice. We do actually kind of agree on blue. I think we all kind of agree that you need phthalo blue and you need ultramarine blue. But, you know, some people are going to be like, no, cobalt's a little better. There's some debate. But Phthalo and Ultramarine are pretty ubiquitous in the color recommendation world. All right, so that was the whites. The blacks are a little bit different. So Dragon Black, and I don't seem to have solid black at my desk, which is interesting. They're actually chromatic blacks. Can you tell? Can we mix it so we can tell? I don't know. But if I had pure black, I would pick that one. If you don't, go ahead and pick one of the other ones. But this is going to be your truest mixing black, is pure black. By chromatic black, I mean you mixed other colors together to get something that looks like black instead of using a black pigment. And I don't think the black pigments are as universal in the miniature world. I did a wash test. So I think it's mixing and testing washes is the blog post, but there's also a video where you can see me do some stuff in person. And of the paints, the Chimera, the Liquitex, I think I had the golden then. Of the ones that I had, there were like 2 or 3 different pigments listed on the ones that listed pigments. So black isn't quite as ubiquitous. Mars black and ivory black, bone black are going to be common. Yes, there are differences. There's warmer whites and cooler whites. There's warmer blacks and cooler blacks. But I'm recommending you choose from your miniature paints so you're getting whatever the company who made your miniature paints decided was a good black, and that is fine. It will work for you. What colors am I up to? I think I need a new paper so we don't get everything all mixed up. And see, my water is great because if you mix all the colors together, you get bleh. I mean, you can get good versions of bleh, but that is how you get really dulled down stuff, is by mixing all of the colors together. Sorry. It's always fun putting a new piece of palette paper on. Christine was saying her husband prefers golden, and I think I have a slight preference for golden. The people at my art store said that it's a little bit better, and I think it is just a little. Like, it's not like Liquitex or whatever other brand are trash. It's just golden. A couple of reasons. One of the reasons I like them is because they're honest about, not honest, they're clear. So they didn't name their stuff acrylic gouache. It's not gouache. It's not water soluble. It's acrylic paint that's matte, self-leveling, and fluid. So they came up with a name to try to convey those properties instead of putting the word gouache on it and confusing a bunch of people. And ink is a similar thing. So Liquitex Acrylic Ink. This is acrylic paint, and so are most of the inks that you're going to get from miniatures company. But one of the reasons I had these to the side, I mean, these are fun and a lot of people love these, but you can see how bright this is. This is 3 pigments. So it doesn't mean that if pigments are mixed together or all of a sudden they're trash or they're useless like my water. This is 2 pigments to make transparent burnt umber, probably because I don't think burnt umber is actually transparent. Or they want to make it a little darker. And this is, I mean, Payne's Gray, by definition, is multiple pigments. So this is black and phthalo. There are different mixes for Payne's Gray. They're not all universal. So I'm recommending that you also throw in the secondaries, and earth colors. So the secondaries in the traditional system would be orange, green, and purple. So this is clear orange. Sunrise orange is a little more pastel, but it's pretty close. And fire orange, kind of ditto. And then explosion orange. This is a little more yellow, and it's also pretty, I mean, they're all pretty transparent because it's red and yellow, and it makes orange, and then it's transparent because those are the pigments we have. Because you also can't have cadmium in miniature paints. Partly because it's expensive, but also because it is, you can't lick your brush and you shouldn't use it as hand lotion. So it's not like so toxic that you shouldn't even be in the same room with a tube of cadmium paint or whatever. But if you have kids, if you're a brush slicker, there are a lot of reasons why it wouldn't be great to have cadmium paint in your life, or at least to think about whether you want cadmium paint in your life. But the people who make paint, if you're exposed to the dry pigments and there's risk of inhalation, that is way more dangerous. So miniature companies aren't going to have it for a couple of reasons, mostly the expense, but also, like, I'm not even anticipating that Chimera is going to get into the cadmium game anytime soon, because Europe is especially twitchy about all this stuff. Europeans can't buy lead white paint anymore, which none of your miniature paints are going to have lead paint, because remember when I was telling you that things are expensive? Yeah, lead white is definitely on that list. So you're safe from all of the toxic pigments because they're too expensive. All right. How was I doing this? Like that. All right. So this is clear orange. But I like them, so I go buy them in my artist paint all the time. I don't have kids. I don't care. I'm not going to live forever. I also don't lick my brush. I'm not as great at not getting paint on my person. Like, I don't use it as hand lotion, but I may unintentionally end up with a lot of paint everywhere when I oil paint. I'm trying to get better about it, but I'm just kind of a disaster. So yeah, you can see this color and this, there's kind of a lot of difference. So this probably has stuff mixed in. I would guess it might even have ochre colors mixed in, which is definitely going to make it dull. So what would we mix orange with to test? What would we mix orange with to test color purity? What an excellent question. Guess we could try clear red and see what happens. See how red of a red we get. Red orange, I guess, how much of a red orange we get. So that's pretty vivid. Often what you're going to be doing with the secondaries is making things less vivid, but that is a different story. Because if you got your Phthalo Blue and you're like, okay, but I don't want that guy to look like they just made his uniform, I want to look dulled down, you would add a little bit of this orange, and that would dull your blue down. So the things across from each other on the color wheel, whichever color wheel you so choose to use. Because if you want to talk about divisions in society, the CMYK versus red, blue, yellow, that's definitely a division in society. People have some feelings. I'm like, just use them all. Use them both. All right, so this is with the clear orange and the clear red together. And that is definitely a vibrant red orange. You can see that it's a little less vibrant. Just a little. I mean, I could easily live with that. That's sunrise orange. This is fire orange. And it's getting a little duller again. Again, I could live with it. And this is explosion orange, which maybe, I thought was pretty transparent. That's interesting that it's, seems more vivid on the paper than it did on the palette, even though I'm using a gray palette. So, I mean, I could live with any of those. I would definitely probably, well, I mean, that really made a nice bright red orange. Let's see what happens when we mix it with phthalo. Or mix any of them with phthalo. I'm gonna need a little more, I think. You are also seeing one of the other choices that you're making when you choose to mix all your colors. You see me putting a lot of paint out? Yeah, that's how it works. If you can't just go get, I want this green off the shelf, you may have to use a few more drops of paint than you were expecting to mix that green. So don't be shocked by that. It doesn't mean that you're bad at color mixing. That's just how it works, especially when you're first starting out. Because this is definitely something that is a skill. So the orange and blue are complementary colors in the traditional color scheme system. So they should dull each other out. You can see that there is a lot of yellow in these oranges. I think I got water and stuff again. Because some of them are getting a little green. But I mean, that's definitely kind of a brown. So that's how you get browns and grays and stuff. I mean, I'm going to recommend that you put a gray in your kit because you probably use gray a lot and it would make your life easier. But yeah, so that's kind of, I think, we're seeing that the clear orange is the orangiest because these ones obviously have yellow in them because they're turning stuff green. But, you know, that means you can't make that brown. I'm going to recommend some browns, so you may or may not care about that. That one's actually a little browner than some of the others. And then Phthalo came and hogged all the attention, like it does. Controversial opinion. I dislike Payne's Gray. There's different ones. I like making the Jane Blundell, the watercolor person, calls it Jane's Gray. So it's ultramarine plus sienna. Or, I mean, it's a little different with PR 101 or PB 101 or whatever it is than the other one. But it's so cool. It's my favorite neutral. I don't think I've ever bothered with Payne's Gray much because I just mix that because I can make it a little warmer if I want, I can make it a little cooler if I want. Because some people's Payne Gray is, you know, it has more blue. Some it's very gray. Oops, that's the wrong thing. I was trying to get to the mixy thing, so try to ignore that. And that is kind of a brown, and that does make clear orange the, sorry, now I'm getting more phone calls. That does make clear orange like the best fit for this particular use. But if you're not going to mix a lot of brown and one of these other oranges does what you need them to do, then go with them. It's not going to be a huge thing. And these are actually, I mean, these are, when I was talking about how if you mix phthalo blue and yellow, you're not going to get a green you would use on orcs or some kind of leaves or stuff like that. These are exactly the kinds of greens that I would want for that sort of thing. So I might want one of these oranges more so that I can mix these greens more easily and not worry about this brown because I'm going to tell you to put the oxide colors in. You don't need the brown. I'm probably like almost done. Yeah. And we didn't even get through all of them, but we'll try. We'll try to get through all of them. So that's orange. So weirdly, I think I would actually go clear orange, or if I didn't care about mixing, neutralizing blue, I might pick fire orange, which is not what I expected going in. That's why sometimes you do the tests. I kind of picked fire orange as the example of not great orange, and I was wrong. So clear green, if you have it, clear phthalo green is very obviously quite a different color. This was a special edition color. I don't think it's still on the web store. So I'm not going to do stuff with it. I will compare it to some of the available paints that you might want. And I'm going to stop doing mixing tests on everything because you kind of get the point now. If you're having trouble deciding if this color or that color is better, you can do some tests with mixing and see. This is Viper Green. And I shook all of these before the show, but there were so many I had to start like way earlier than I normally do. And you can tell that one isn't thoroughly mixed, but we should be able to see the color, so I'm not going to sweat it. This is Grass Green. Making sure I put these down in the right order. I do that to myself when I'm painting all the time too. So I think those were all the ones that when I went to the shelf, I was actually very shocked to find that. So I have, I organized my paints some time ago, a few months ago. And there's a blog post about how you can organize your paints too, because I wanted to share my experiences. So I have a shelf that's like vivid greens. Well, okay, it's 2 shelves. And then 3 shelves that are like natural greens, softer greens. So it's the kind of the brighter stuff, and then the stuff that I would more often use for orcs and vegetation. And I mean, some of the brighter greens are for vegetation too, but some of them are not. And I was really kind of shocked when I went to the shelf that I thought were the brighter greens, and I did not come up with as many options, like as many alternatives for clear green as I was expecting to. I'm not sure if that's because, Anne's done a lot of mixing it in so that they're more opaque. Remember, I didn't mix this one well, so don't judge like the consistency too much. That is me, not the paint, I think. So yeah, between these 3, I would probably go with the grass green as closer to the clear green and a little more opaque. We can check the opacity with my handy test. Yeah, it's a little more opaque. So I would probably pick this as the more useful like color, depending on, if you're not super into color mixing, you're going to want something that's a little more opaque. Anne is very happy to start with, transparent colors and add her own white and black in to make them less transparent, but we don't all want to do that. So this is a special edition color, and this is a special edition color, but I have some alternatives. This is the clear phthalo green. This is one that's kind of close to it, is the reptilian green. And then forest green, clearly there's blue in here, but it still has some of the characteristics. So, you don't need to have 2 greens either. But just if you wanted to have kind of that, I think we'd call this a more viridian green in Artland. Which viridian is a specific pigment, and I don't even know if they make watercolor paints that use it. I mean, acrylic paints that use it, someone probably does. And watercolor paints, it cracks in the palette, so I don't know if it would be a problem for acrylic paints. But let's talk about purple, because you definitely want a lot of purple. Curse 13, in fact, is just talking about purple. I do most of my mixes trying to find natural fantasy skin tones or purples because I just don't buy purple. How do you not buy purple? Oh my gosh. I buy all the purple. So this is clear purple, which I suspect is kind of dioxazine violet adjacent, if not directly. This is Carnival Purple that is now no longer a special edition color, so I can show it to you because it released recently. And then if you wanted a little more opaque version, I think this Twilight Purple probably works. So I would probably, I'd probably go with the Carnival Purple, because it's like you're getting a little bit of both. Like even that darkness seems more dioxazine than the clear to me. And as you know, this is Michael Proctor certified. So that's why it's a back. Well, actually, it started as a special edition color. It's not one of these ones that came back and left and then came back. It started as a special edition color, and there was kind of enough buzz about it that it got put into the main line because it's a pretty cool color. But now let's talk about. I think it is important to have these. So you guys know I'm excited about Oxide Yellow. I did not think to write down what episode it is, but one of these shows I did a lot of how do you mix flesh tones from the Oxide Yellow, Oxide Red, and Oxide Brown, which is why I would include these. Also, you can mix a whole bunch of browns. Moonlight Minis Carnival Purple was originally called Proctor Purple, and used to be very kind to some of us, and if there was like a color we really liked that there wasn't like a paint equivalent for, sometimes she would mix it, and I think that is how Carnival Purple was born. I, of course, had a brown, because I'm boring. Bender Brown has never come out. I think it's really easy to mix, because I'm like the most boring person on earth. But brown is one of those, like, I just like, when I think of brown, like just overall brown, like a very specific color comes to my mind, and it wasn't in the Reaper paint line at the time. I think there's one that's closer now. And then I ended up not using it, and it's like one of I think it's Bobby Jackson's second favorite color next to, of course, the green that he must have. So this is the Oxide Yellow. That's probably like the purest version of this yellow. This is non-metallic metal gold base. And yellow ochres do vary widely in the like art mixes. So the fact that there's a little bit of white or black in here probably won't change your life too much. This is Palomino Gold, I used this a lot for years up until this came out. I think Anne liked this one better, but I just got used to Palomino Gold, which I do use in my gold recipe even. So I think either of these would be viable substitutes, but maybe I should try to do a little skin mixing at the end if there's time. So I'm gonna not dropper those out for now, and work on I have to do weird things to fit all these in. All right, so no, that's not it. That is the Oxide Red. So some alternatives I found for that are Rust Brown, which is a little duller, and the oxides are all very opaque, so there's no reason not to put the oxide in your kit unless you don't have it and you don't want to buy more paint. So there you're not making the same choice between, I want higher coverage versus I want purer color. The oxides are the purest versions of those colors and also the most opaque, which is part of what's nice about earth tones. But Auburn Shadow, I mean, there's clearly some other stuff in here, but it's still, it might still do the job. Hellborn Red, I'd probably say is closer than the Auburn Shadow, but it's a fairly new color, so you may not have it. Okay, now I fired one paint for being a 2.9, but I might have been wrong. Yeah, I think it is newer than I thought. I was thinking that was the old HD number system, but I don't think it is. I think Torchlight is a newer paint. The new numbering system, I don't always know anymore, which are, some of the box sets that are related to holidays or whatever. It's not as obvious as it used to be. So get the oxide. I mean, I love these so much. If I didn't convince you in the previous show, I probably can't fix you now. But the oxides will make your life easier for having more options for skin tone and browns. Even if you include the skin tone and brown, it's just going to give you more ways to alter those or more things to try to mix your own from. So this is the Oxide Brown. This is, I think Wyvern Leather was the one I found that was closest to it. And you'll start to see that, yeah, this is a lot duller. And this isn't quite as red. I would pick the Ruddy Leather over that. Like Basic Dirt is no. I think maybe I just put this in here as an example of what not to use. I don't know. Because I had a whole other box for what not to use. Or why multiple pigments compiling is going to start making your results go weirder and weirder, or less like what you think they were going to be. So Oxide Brown if you can get it, but if you already have Wyvern Leather or Ruddy Leather, you can give those a try. So those are what I would call the core colors. So the white, black, the the clears, and the oxides. Those are like your core colors. If you want to have a Reaper set or equivalents from another company. But if you had more space, because what do we add? Like 10 or 11, I think. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. Yeah, I think it might be 12. But probably you can fit a few more paints than that in. Like if you need the smallest possible set, there's your smallest possible set. You can even leave the oxides out. You can mix all of these colors. You can mix a color like this from the primaries and black and white. And I know artists who like to do that. I love my earth tones, so that is not me. But those are like your cores. But then what else would you want? If you like to paint with metallics, I didn't mention any metallics, so you probably want one of those. And although, I've shown you how you can use those oxide colors to make skin, if you're not very comfortable color mixing, skin is going to be one of the tough ones to do. So you may want to have at least one and probably two kind of starter skin colors. Dark browns are great for dark skin people, most of them are going to look pretty natural, and hopefully you can eyeball it if it doesn't. For Caucasian skin, I cannot remember now. Anne frequently says how either tan skin or tan shadow are kind of like her generic starting point, or can be a generic starting point for lighter skin tones, and then you just add a little bit of this, a little bit of that to shift it more golden or more tanned or whatever. And I cannot remember which, because I would probably pick a different one as my sort of overall. See, I like this gnome flesh. It's nice and opaque, and it's kind of a little bit warm. It's a little bit cool. Or I would mix a bunch. But any of these, I think, so tan skin, tan shadow, which I think there's something weird about my bottle, so don't judge that thing. I don't know if I didn't mix enough or what. Gnome flesh. But there are, you know, anything kind of, you don't want it to be too light because it's real easy to just add white and lighten those up. But, so here I think you want to go more medium. But if you wanted to have, if you had space for more than one, I would pick something like very different from each other. So this is Ready Flesh. It's got a lot of yellow in it. It's a great highlight for dark skin. Or you can use this as like a starting point for a lighter colored dark skin. And it's very different in color tone to this. This would also be useful for a lot of different leather colors. You can mix a little and do some more leather colors. Which you can do with, I mean, leather is skin, so, you know, it can be skin color. But you probably wouldn't want to make someone's leather and their skin, like, the same. You'd want to shift it a little bit. But I would suggest a skin color. If you like metallics, kind of a similar principle. You want something kind of not too dark, not too light, because you can add black or other regular paints, because, you know, shadows aren't as reflective, so it's okay if you have less reflectivity in the dark areas, or your wash isn't as reflective. And then you can add lighter metallics to this to make other versions or make highlights. And you can add those same ones to golds. So you want to have some kind of gold brown. Oh, I didn't actually show the pigments or the paint names of those. I took my syrup and everything. So this is Blade Steel, which is one of my favorites. It's a little bit warmer of a steel. So if you prefer like more of a blue steel, honed steel. I wouldn't put both in. They're not different enough to justify putting both in. Yellows, you have more options. And again, I would go, you know, this is a little light even. Like I wouldn't put new gold in. This is Cursed Gold. This is Dragon Gold. This is Dwarven Gold. I'd probably go with the Dwarven Gold. Or, I mean, Antique is almost a little too dark. But, you know, this is one of those areas where people have their own preferences. But we're going to test some of these. So these are what you would add to lighten them up. So this is Shining Mithril. And I mean both the gold and the silver. There's not really like a super, it's not really worth having a super light gold to add in. You can do it with these. Pearl White is going to be a little bit different. And might be worth having just to, you can make your own metallics with Pearl White and then clear, say. So if you want colored metallics. It doesn't look like it on this label, but this is polished silver. And this is bright silver, which I see now is a special edition, but if you happen to have that one as your like lightest, it is the darkest of the lightest ones as well. So, but let's test that out. Mixing, I'll just pick one gold. I will pick the Dwarven Gold because it's a little darker. Because I'm genuinely not sure which one of these would work the best to mix highlights. for the gold. This is such a great time to have a chronic cough condition too. It's really not at all stressful when I go to the grocery store and people think I have the plague. But luckily it doesn't really seem to get bad unless certain pollen is in the air or I'm talking for an extended period of time. And well, I'm actually going to put out some of this pearl white and grab a couple clears and show you what I mean about that. And I forgot I had dismissed the special edition paint, so I didn't need that last little section. There's a lump in there because I had something stuck in the nozzle, looks like. So that, again, is not the paint, that's me. Let's get a new sheet for this. Do you need to say hi to everybody? Come here. Come say hi. Here's Ella. Ella says hi. Will Ella let me paint? Let's find out. I don't know if any of you were watching Reaper Errant the other day. You had a rare Corbin sighting. Okay, Ella is not letting me paint. Hi, baby. Can you go down? Can you go down? I'll give you lots of snuggles. Okay. Sometimes that happens. You can't stop snuggling Ella until Ella says you can stop snuggling Ella. So that's the Dwarven Gold out of the box. But I'm not doing it right, so there's going to be lots of leg flailing. Well, she attempts to make me do it right. So this is the, oh, I did such a good job of keeping them in the correct order. I know this was the pearl white. No, it wasn't. I think it was the shiny mithril. Because it's interesting, I'm seeing a lot more orange there than I expected. And you get free Ella hair now with every swatch. So that didn't actually really get lighter. That got to be a different color. That is interesting. So let's get even more of that. I was assuming that that light color would have a lot more effect than it did. Ella is adorable. She's an adorable little space cadet. Hi. So I don't know that Shiny Mithril does what I said it does, but let's try with the pearl white. Or maybe it's Dwarven Gold. It has a lot more not gold in it than I realized. So I might rather have Dragon Gold. I might repeat this test with Dragon Gold and decide that I would rather have that. And this is polished silver. I mean, I like this color a lot, but it doesn't look like a highlight to gold to me. So I learned something. But now let's try the clears with pearl. So we'll try making a magenta metallic or silk. I mean, it would probably look more like silk really. And what other color? Let's try the clear phthalo green, which I know it's a special edition color, but I'm intrigued. And clear purple. Hi, are you silly? Yes, you are. So wow, I think we just made hot pink metallic. So I guess we won't see the shimmer exactly until it dries. But I'm also, let's get that mithril back. I want to see what that does mixed with the magenta. Because I'm not sure the pearl is going to be shiny, shiny, shiny. Kind of a comparison. I don't think any of these are going to be as intensely metallic as a paint that you're going to buy, because Reaper knows how to do this way better than I do. And they have the option of adding extra flake in if they need, or, you know, figuring out the balance between the flake and the color. But if you have, you know, a very light colored silver or a white paint, I think Vallejo makes a paint called Metallic Medium, and you'll actually get a different color mixing Metallic Medium versus this Pearl White, even though they're kind of the same concept, than you will mixing the Pearl White. Yeah, the Pearl White and the Metallic Medium are slightly different, but it's worth having something like that. If you have space, just for the flexibility that you make your own silks and satins there. I think this one's dry. You can kind of see a little shimmer. Like, it's going to be a silk or satin. It's not going to be a plate mail. Making hot pink plate mail metallic is hard. I think even if you are a paint mixing company. But you know what you like for metallics as well. So that one's going to be a little more to taste. But I recommend like a medium value gold, a medium value steel, and then some kind of silver platinum, something like that. If you like to use washes, like if you're someone who uses black wash on almost everything, or you use a lot of flesh wash, well, like, include those. Now we're kind of at the how do you paint and what do you like thing. So any remaining paint slots that you have available are what's going to make your life easier, what's going to make it more like when you paint at home. So, you know, I don't use washes. I wouldn't include those. I would absolutely include blue liner, because I don't want to mix blue and black every time to get, like, I'm sure you can. I'm sure you can mix Phthalo Blue and the black and get something pretty similar to this. I don't want to do it every time. I use that much blue liner. I would probably also include something like this for a similar reason. Yes, I can mix a little bit of yellow in with my white and I get something like this. I'm going to be mixing so many highlights that does it make my life easier, improve the quality of my life if I just throw this in the box. If I have space, yes, absolutely. So that fill out your remaining slots. You know, some people really love inks. They love to add them in to intensify colors or for specific effects, or, you know, the other way to make, that's true. If you get your silver and you put the clear over it, that's another way to make kind of a shimmery gem silk type of thing. So after that, you know, you've got the clears, the oxides, at least one skin color, but probably two, a steel, a gold, and a light colored metallic. Everything after that would be to taste. So, you know, the colors of your army, you don't want to have to mix this one color green. All, you know, Bobby paints his base rims meadow green. He's going to want to throw the meadow green in his bag. Then it's all stuff like that. So hopefully that helps you figure out what to bring if you're coming to ReaperCon, if you want to go paint in your game store, if you want to go paint your friend's house. I'm going to move this palette so that I don't have a multicolored cat, because I guarantee that would happen soon. Wouldn't be the first time. And so I didn't get to talking about them. I'll probably, okay, be cautious. Probably do it next week. But the Superwashes and all of what we talked about is going to come into play with these, because as you can see, they're very vivid colors. I suspect that they're similar pigments are used in the clear colors. Now, my understanding is, I think they said on reaperlive there's going to be 12. Is that what they said? And my understanding is we are getting something flesh and at least one brown, because it is actually really, these colors are so potent. That's where I was having problems, is dulling them down. Like, I would mix, you know, this in the orange together trying to get brown, and I wouldn't get brown. I might get a nice, like I got a beautiful black, I think, with those two, and I got a beautiful black with something else, and I'm like, great, I love black, that's fine, I like mixing my own blacks, but I really, really, really want a brown. So some of the miniatures I painted, I ended up kind of mixing the oxides or some other thing with the brush on sealer. I don't know if they're going to have a specific medium for it, but that worked fine for me to get that effect. So I'll just show these real quick. These are figures that were painted with the Superwashes, and some. Also, I have a brown that nobody knows where I got this or what it is. So I don't assume that this is one of the browns that's going to be in there. It's also not the same consistency as the others. But I did use that in the first set of miniatures I painted because I was not aware that... Because Ron kept saying, why are you talking to me about this brown? You have black. I'm like, I don't have black. I have brown. I had to paint it out and send him a photo and prove it to him. And he's like, okay, I have no idea what that is. I'm like, well, you sent it to me. You tell me. So this is over Zenithal Prime, which one of the minis I've set aside to work on. I've got 2 orcs here. One is Zenithal Prime and one is not. So I can do some stuff next week and we can compare the differences. This was me trying to make a dulled down green. Look how dull it is. It's so very, very dull. Because these are just such potent colors. It's really nice. Moonlight Minis. Having a red and green that mixed to black is pretty amazing. It's so rare to get colors that completely neutralize each other. Yeah, I like a Viridian and Magenta. Oh, that's such a pretty neutral. I mean, phthalo green too. Just that kind of, this kind of green. This kind of green plus magenta. Oh, chef's kiss. Very beautiful. This is the green out of the bottle on the robes, and then so I painted all the robes with the green, and then I went over the edge parts with a second coat of the blue. So I didn't mix the teal. I let it happen because they're somewhat transparent. You can layer to create color. You don't have to mix all the colors. I think is what I'm trying to say. It's, I mean, I don't know. I think it's showing up a little more of a yellow green on the screen than it is in the hand. But yeah, that I kept forgetting to use the green. Like I painted a bunch of these. Well, not a bunch. I painted like 5 of these, and I hadn't used the green on anything. And I'm like, well, I better just go in and use the green a lot. This one, I shaded it with the black wash first. I was curious whether, you know, I could create some deeper shading with that, and I think it worked. But I also did a little bit of highlights. So I took whatever the colors were and added in just like little tiny bits of white and put some highlights on. So as with anything, if you're willing to do a little extra work, you get a little extra benefit for it, I guess. So the metallics, I did metallic paint first and then used the Superwash black. This is when I had the real black over, and I did do a little extra shading like on the shield here to create that gradient where the shield's starting to slip away. And I think a little bit extra, like a second coat, just applied to the crevices, which again, if you're willing to do a little extra work, you can get a little extra benefit. Where's another one? This guy, I did write this down somewhere, so it's not too bad if I forget, but I will have to look it up. I think did I do the wash on him, or if he was, I'm not sure if he was white, like just white, or if I had done some pre-shading, but I didn't thin the black enough, so I ended up highlighting, you know, brushing the bone again, but the other stuff is just straight Superwashes. Who else do I have? Oh, this angel, and this kind of demonstrates the difference between, so this was just thinning the black, and then this was thinning the black and adding some white, so you'll get different, painting something transparent over white, you'll get a different effect sometimes than adding white. So it kind of gives you more options with these, I think. So even though it's just going to be 12 colors, it's like, I think I added white to that gray. I didn't really do, oh, okay, so this miniature started off gray. It was that color. because I had it left over from a class, and I dry brushed it white and then put these over. I'm not sure that was worth it. I mean, maybe it's going to be kind of like doing the zenithal prime. I don't know if it made a huge difference in the end, or if it's easier just to do the highlighting thing like with this guy. When we're talking about paint properties and stuff, one of the things that is pretty common in traditional art is you make your shadows with transparent colors and you make your highlights with opaque colors, because opaque colors seem more solid. Like, you can even build it up so it's like chunks, but they appear to be moving towards you, where transparent colors are going to be appearing to move away from you a little bit or appear recessed. So the superwash idea is cool, but adding actual highlights is going to look a little more realistic or contrasted, or I'm not sure how you want to put it, but it's going to pop more. I guess I would go back to our old favorite pop. So you don't have to do it, but depending, like, just understanding how it works a little bit. So this was, I think I put a few extra, like I did 2 coats on her boots because it was very transparent. I wanted a darker color. So it works that way, just like with regular paint, I guess. And I did do a little extra shading on the orange, which was partly just me trying to mix the orange I wanted. Like, it wasn't as much, the paint wasn't doing what I wanted. It was the color wasn't doing what I wanted. And then this one was various attempts at mixing browns and blacks, and then just the blue. Having more of a military blue, I guess, than a vibrant out of the bottle blue. But I actually have way more fun with these things than I was expecting, and I might even be willing to paint some of my husband's board game miniatures now, which I have never before volunteered to do. People always come over to our house and they're like, well, all your board games must have these really cool miniatures. And I'm like, ha, no. It's like when you live in the house in the carpenter, you probably have old ratty falling apart chairs, because that's the carpenter's job and they don't want to do it on their off time. But anyway, hopefully that wasn't totally boring. I didn't ask Quindy as we went along if we only had like 4 people watching, because I was droning on about colors. But if you want to put together a small set of colors so you can paint in the open area at ReaperCon or something similar to that, hopefully you now have the information you need to go do that. And I hope you have fun, or at least weren't totally bored. I'm sure Quindy's going to find us a raid, and it'll probably be someone way more vibrant and saturated than I am. So I'll wait until that pops up, and then I will say goodbye. I appreciate you all putting up with me and your comments and stuff. Green User said the stream was useful. And Nico's still here, and Kirst is still here, so hopefully it wasn't too dire. And I'll see you next week and actually paint with these colors instead of just telling you about them. So, bye-bye, everybody. Thank you again.